On the 13th of August, 2018, the Frederick Police Department in Colorado received a call from a worried woman who was concerned about the disappearance of her friend, Shannon Watts, and her two daughters. Shannon's husband, a man named Christopher Watts, appeared distressed as he was quick to respond to the authorities. He even gave interviews to the press, pleading for the return of his wife and kids. However, just 2 days later, the disturbing truth behind Shannon's sudden disappearance was uncovered. The authorities had used a failed polygraph test taken on the 15th of August to identify their prime suspect, and the morbid revelations shocked the entire state of Colorado. Christopher Watts was born and raised in Spring Lake, North Carolina. His wife, Shannon Razuzek, also grew up in North Carolina, but she and her family stayed in Aberdeen. The couple eventually crossed paths in 2010, and after dating for 2 years, they got married on the 3rd of November 2012. Chris had a job at Anadarko Petroleum, and Shannon worked from home as a sales representative. The couple welcomed their first child, Bella, on the 17th of December 2013. 2 years after Bella was born, Shannon gave birth to their second daughter, Celeste, and in August 2018, she was 15 weeks pregnant with their third child. It was a boy, and the couple had already given him the name Nico. Everything seemed perfect on paper for the Watts family at the time. The couple was living happily in a 5-bedroom home in Frederick, Colorado with their 2 children, their 4-year-old daughter Bella, and their 3-year-old daughter Celeste, while expecting their third. From the outside, it looked like Chris and Shannon had built a loving family that was still growing. Which is why no one could have imagined the morbid horrors that were uncovered after Shannon and her 2 daughters suddenly went missing on the 13th of August, 2018. It all began during the early hours of that fateful day. Shannon had just come back from a business trip around 1 a.m., and she was driven home by her friend and co-worker, Nicole Utoft Atkinson. Christopher was at home with the girls when Shannon arrived, and according to his initial statements, he'd last seen his family around 5 a.m. before he left for work that day. Later at noon, Shannon's co-worker, Nicole Atkinson, came back to the Watts family residence. She was apparently worried about her friend Shannon, who'd missed an important gynecology appointment with her doctor and was not returning any of her texts. Nicole had also called her several times, but there was no answer, and Shannon didn't attend a business meeting they had later that day. Nicole just wanted to make sure everything was okay with her friend, but when she arrived at the couple's home, Shannon was nowhere to be found. After confirming the house was empty and Shannon could still not be reached, Nicole knew something was wrong, so she immediately called Christopher at the Frederick Police Department. An officer from the department arrived at the scene at around 1:40 p.m., giving the officer permission to enter and look through the house. Before Chris arrived, Nicole informed the officer about Shannon's odd behavior during their work trip, stating how Shannon wasn't feeling good and hadn't been eating well either. Shannon later confided in Nicole, telling her how she and Chris had been having issues. Shannon had apparently said Chris wasn't acting like himself and that she suspected he was cheating on her. After hearing Nicole's statement, the officer conducted a welfare check. He looked around the house, calling out Shannon's name and trying her cell. Despite the officer's efforts, the only response he got was the eerie silence that now filled the house, and Shannon's phone remained disconnected. After the officer's welfare check, he continued to look around the house before he eventually found Shannon's phone and purse with her medication in it. Nicole pointed out how leaving her meds behind was very unusual for Shannon, since she often needed the medication with her at all times. Shannon's wedding ring was also found in the couple's bedroom, and her phone was later uncovered between the pillows on the family couch. The officers also discovered Shannon's car, in addition to the girls' car seats in the garage. There was an active body cam on the officer's chest that had recorded everything on the scene, and the footage, which was later released to the public, revealed something very odd. Christopher's mannerisms were extremely strange, as he didn't seem like a worried husband. Detectives noticed how he was overly anxious and fidgety, as if he was hiding something. He was also less concerned with the whereabouts and well-being of his family, and more worried about clearing his name while avoiding difficult questions. Chris's behavior became even more suspicious when the family's neighbor, Nate Trinistich, suggested that the authorities should check his surveillance camera footage, as it was located near the Watts garage. The camera had apparently captured Chris loading something into his truck earlier that morning, and Nate thought this was strange. Christopher was hesitant to look at the surveillance footage and nervously gave lengthy explanations, telling the officers that he'd been loading up some tools. It was clear to the detectives that Christopher was hiding something, and they decided to carry out an extensive investigation to uncover the truth. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, got involved in the investigation the following morning. The detectives went through Chris's phone records, and they found texts that revealed an affair he was having with a woman named Nikki Kissinger. Chris denied the affair, claiming he had nothing to hide, so the detectives suggested taking a polygraph test to clear all doubts, and Chris agreed. On the 15th of August, 2018, CBI agent Tammy Lee spoke with Chris before the polygraph test and told him how stupid it would be to take the test if he knew anything about the disappearances. But Chris still insisted that he was telling the truth. Several questions were asked during the polygraph test, and after it was over, the reading showed that Chris had failed the test badly, as his answers revealed that he'd been lying to everyone. It was at that point Christopher broke down and admitted to brutally murdering his wife. He'd initially confessed his crimes to his father, Ronnie Watts, before coming clean to the authorities. The truth had finally come out, and Christopher Lee Watts was arrested for the murder of his wife, Shannon Catherine Rzucek. In a last-ditch attempt to save himself, Christopher told the authorities he killed only his wife, Shannon, and that she was the one who killed their two daughters. Christopher claimed he'd found Shannon smothering their daughters to death after she'd discovered his affair with Nikki and his plans to separate. He told the authorities that he killed her out of justice for his children. But the authorities did not believe him and asked for the whereabouts of the corpses. Christopher revealed the locations of his family's bodies on the 16th of August, 2018 to the police. He'd hidden their corpses in a remote oil field that belonged to his former employers, Anadarko Petroleum, who had fired him the day he was arrested. The detectives found Shannon in a shallow grave, and the bodies of Bella and Celeste were in a crude oil tank. On the 21st of August, 2018, Chris Watts was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder in addition to 2 extra counts for the murder of his daughters, who were still under the age of 12. He was also charged with 3 counts of tampering with a deceased body and the unlawful termination of a pregnancy. In November, Christopher finally pled guilty to all 3 murder counts, telling authorities in a later interrogation released in March 2019 that he murdered Shannon during an argument about their separation. He'd asked for a divorce, and Shannon threatened to take the girls and to leave immediately, which enraged him, so he strangled her. His daughter Bella woke up as he was trying to move Shannon's body, and he told Bella that her mother was sick. Chris then drove Shannon's body and the 2 girls to the oil field, where he violently smothered his own daughters to death with their blankets, one after the other. He described the morbid act in detail, saying how Bella had to watch her sister die before he turned his attention on her. He even explained how Bella fought back, fighting for her life and biting down on her tongue repeatedly before she died. Chris then buried Shannon in a shallow grave before shoving Celeste and Bella's body through a small opening in a crude oil tank. During that same interrogation, Chris finally revealed his reason for the brutal murders to the detectives. He'd apparently told Shannon he didn't love her anymore. He even admitted his affair to Shannon, saying how Nikki Kissinger saw him in a way that was more appealing to him. Chris then said Nikki was everything Shannon couldn't be. As the interrogation continued, Christopher mentioned how he'd told Nikki Kissinger that he was in the final stages of divorce when the affair started. Nikki later confirmed this to the authorities, saying Chris seemed to be in the process of securing housing for his daughters. She then told the detectives how he made her believe he was a good and rational father figure, and she only found out he was still married when the family's disappearance made headline news. Christopher shared the thoughts that ran through his mind that morning with the detectives. And in his own words, "I didn't want to do this, but I did it. I don't even want to say it felt like I had to. It just felt like there was already something in my mind that was implanted that I was going to do it. And when I woke up that morning, it was going to happen, and I had no control over it." This statement led the detectives to believe Christopher was possibly an antisocial sociopath who killed his family just because he could and thought he could get away with it. The district attorney of Weld County wanted to push for the death penalty, which was still applicable at the time, but Shannon's family did not want any further deaths, so it wasn't put forward. Chris was then denied bail during his first trial and was later charged with no chance of parole. Even though Shannon's family pleaded for the death penalty not to be enacted, their grief and disbelief could be felt throughout the courtroom. Shannon's father, Frank Rzucek, called Chris a heartless monster in his sentencing hearing, saying he expected and trusted Chris to take care of them, not kill them and toss them away like trash. Shannon's mother, Sandra, also gave a statement at the hearing saying, "I didn't want death for you because that's not my right. Your life is between you and God, and I pray that He has mercy on you." Cindy Watts, Chris's mother, also made a statement at the hearing, addressing him directly, saying that while she and his family still loved him and forgave him, she couldn't condone the crime he committed or ignore the heartbreak he had caused. In Cindy's own words, "I am still struggling to understand how and why this tragedy occurred. I may never be able to understand and accept it, but I pray for peace and healing for all of us. We have loved you from the beginning, and we still love you now. This might be hard for some to understand how I can sit here under these circumstances. We are heartbroken, and although we can't imagine what could have led us to this day, we still love you and we forgive you, son." Christopher Lee Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences for the murder counts and 84 years added for the deceased body tampering charge and determination of Shannon's pregnancy. Chris has been reported to be a changed man in prison, having a Bible he reads consistently alongside regular exercise. He allegedly receives occasional letters from women who believe he's misunderstood and deserves a second chance. Even with Christopher in jail, the pain didn't end for Shannon's family. In the face of tragedy, they were met with online backlash and harassment. The Rzusek family was a constant target of far-fetched conspiracy theories and accusations that took a physical, mental, and physical toll on each of them. In the end, the Rzusek family tried their best to focus on healing from the traumatic wounds of their loss, trying to drown out the virtual attacks as they reminisced on the good memories of Shannon with her darling daughters, Bella and Celeste.
It was supposed to be an ordinary night, the kind of shift I'd done 100 times before. Nairobi's air felt heavy that evening. Quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that creeps into your bones before something bad happens. I'd been driving since sundown, ferrying passengers across the city. Most were harmless. Night workers, couples arguing in whispers, drunk partygoers mumbling street names. But around 1 a.m., the streets went hollow. I remember passing through the industrial zone near Outer Ring Road, where the lamps flickered and shadows leaned too far into the road. That was when he waved me down. A man in a black hoodie, face hidden under the dim yellow streetlight, clutching something under his arm. I almost didn't stop, but he stepped forward too quickly, like he'd been waiting just for me. He said he needed a ride to a nearby car wash station where his friend worked the night shift. His voice was deep, unsteady, and something about the way he avoided my eyes made me uneasy. Still, I unlocked the doors. Money's money, I told myself. He sat in the back, behind me, too quiet, too still. Most passengers fiddled with their phones or coughed or asked about the fare. Not him, just silence. My mirror showed nothing but his shadow, a dark outline that didn't move. The radio started to crackle, then cut out completely, leaving the hum of the tires as the only sound between us. A few minutes in, I noticed something strange. Every time I passed under a streetlight, I caught the faint glint of glass in his hand. I told myself it was just a phone, but it wasn't. When we reached the roundabout, my headlights caught it clearly, a jagged bottleneck, reflecting, sharp and wet. My fingers tightened on the wheel. I didn't want to panic him, but every instinct screamed, "Don't turn around." My heart was thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That's when the headlights from another car appeared behind me, flashing once, twice, then again and again. Someone was tailing me. At first, I thought it was just another impatient driver trying to overtake me. But then they slowed down, matching my speed, flashing their high beams again. That's when it hit me. They weren't signaling me to move. They were trying to warn me. and in that moment the air inside my car felt colder. I looked into the mirror again. The man had shifted closer to my seat. His breathing was louder, heavier. I could see the outline of his arm, raised slightly, and in the faint red glow of the brake lights, the broken glass shimmered like teeth. The high beams behind me didn't stop. They kept flashing, long, blinding bursts that filled my mirrors and drowned the road ahead in white. I wanted to slow down, to pull over and confront whoever it was, but something inside me whispered, "Don't stop." The man behind me hadn't said a word since we left the main road, yet I could feel him watching me, his silence heavier than a scream. The road stretched empty ahead. Nairobi at that hour feels like another world. No pedestrians, no honking, just the low moan of the wind between half-finished buildings. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, pretending not to notice him shifting in the seat. Every small sound, the creak of leather, the rattle of the loose bottle caps near the cup holder, made me tighten my chest. The car behind me drew closer. I could make out its headlights bouncing in the rearview mirror, glaring like angry eyes. Then the driver honked, short, urgent, again and again. My passenger leaned forward slightly, and his reflection appeared clearer now. His face was pale, damp, and his eyes, they were looking at me. They were locked onto the mirror. That was the moment I knew. He knew. I knew. My breath caught. I tried to think fast. I couldn't just slam the brakes. He was right behind me. Too close, too dangerous. So I pressed harder on the accelerator, hoping to reach the next gas station or security checkpoint. The road twisted sharply toward the old bypass, and that's when I felt it. The cold press of something against the back of my neck. "Don't look back," he said quietly. His voice was calm, almost polite, and that terrified me even more. The car behind me honked again, louder this time. The man hissed, cursed under his breath. I felt him shift, trying to keep out of sight. I could hear the bottle scraping against the seatbelt buckle, a harsh metallic sound that sliced through the silence. "Take the next turn," he ordered. But the high-beam car wouldn't stop. It followed close, practically blinding both of us. For a split second, the glare illuminated the back seat, and that's when I saw it clearly in the mirror. The bottle was covered in blood. Fresh blood. I don't remember deciding what to do next. My hands moved before my mind did. I slammed my horn and swerved left, feigning a mechanical issue. The man jerked sideways, losing balance. I saw my chance. With one motion, I kicked the door open and threw myself out, hitting the dirt hard. The car behind me screeched to a stop, headlights flaring. Someone ran toward me shouting. I could barely hear through the ringing in my ears. The taxi's rug door flung open. The man stumbled out, glass glinting in his hand. He looked rabid, wild, more animal than human. But the moment he saw the approaching lights, he bolted into the dark bushland beside the road, disappearing into the night. I sat there trembling, dirt in my hair, my palms bleeding. The other driver, a middle-aged man, grabbed my shoulders and said, "He was sitting behind you the whole time. I saw him through your back window." That sentence would replay in my head for weeks. They found my car half a mile down the road, headlights still on, engine still running, and the passenger door wide open. He was gone, just gone. Police searched the area for hours but found nothing. Only a trail of footprints leading toward the quarry behind the trees. They told me he'd been seen before. The same description, the same broken bottle. A man who preyed on night shift drivers. None of his victims ever saw his face clearly enough to identify him. For days, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his breath on my neck, heard the bottle scraping against metal. Sometimes I'd wake up to phantom headlights flashing through my window, and my hands would clench automatically around a steering wheel that wasn't there. I never drove nights again, but once, weeks later, while walking past a car wash on the edge of town, I saw it, A figure sitting in the back seat of a parked taxi, head tilted, watching me through the glass. When I blinked, it was gone. They say the high-beam driver saved my life that night. I believe that. But part of me still wonders if he really did. Because sometimes, in the corner of my mirror, when the lights flash just right, I swear, I still see someone sitting behind me. The following story is based on real events, with some details adapted to protect privacy. Viewer discretion is advised, as this story contains accounts of abduction, terror, and psychological trauma. This video is intended for educational and awareness purposes only. I still remember that night like it happened yesterday, though I've tried desperately to forget it. The cold air biting at my skin, the silence of the rural road stretching endlessly ahead, and then the bodies. 2 strangers, bound and abandoned, and me, barely clinging to life. I don't know why I survived. Maybe luck, maybe chance, or maybe because whoever was behind it wanted someone left to remember. I only know that for hours afterward, I replayed every detail, every shadow, every sound, wishing I could erase it from my memory. It began as nothing more than a late-night drive. I had stayed longer than I had planned to at a friend's place, laughing, eating, talking about things that seemed trivial now. The drive home should have been simple, an hour and a half of quiet roads winding through farmland. The kind of trip you make half asleep, radio humming softly in the background. But that night, the air felt different, heavy, still. I rolled the window down, hoping the breeze would calm my nerves, but even the night seemed to be holding its breath. Then, out of nowhere, headlights appeared behind me. A vehicle, maybe a truck, maybe an SUV. I couldn't tell at first. It kept its distance for a while, far enough not to draw attention, but close enough that I could feel its presence in the mirror. Each time I changed lanes, it did too. When I slowed, it slowed. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was paranoia, that the driver just happened to be heading the same way. But when the road narrowed into a lonely 2-lane stretch surrounded by trees, the headlights grew brighter, closer, more deliberate. The vehicle stayed glued to my bumper, its high beams flooding my rearview mirror. Panic started to crawl up my throat. I pressed the gas, but my car sputtered. Then, with a violent jerk, it stalled. I remember the sound of gravel under tires as the other vehicle stopped behind me. My hands trembled as I tried to restart the engine, but it was useless. I glanced up, and through the blinding light I saw figures stepping out. 2 of them, maybe 3. Their silhouettes stretched unnaturally long in the glare, faceless, almost inhuman in their calmness. Before I could react, the door was yanked open. Cold hands grabbed me, pulling me out into the freezing night. My head hit the ground, and a sharp pain exploded behind my eyes. I tried to scream, but a gloved hand covered my mouth, forcing silence. A cloth, a rope, a blindfold, everything blurred together. The world became sound and sensation. Footsteps, the slam of a trunk. My heartbeat was thundering in my ears. Then the smell. Damp earth, gasoline, something metallic. I was thrown or dragged, I couldn't tell which. When the blindfold came off, we were in a clearing. The trees loomed above us like watchful sentinels, and the moon cast everything in a pale, cruel light. That's when I saw them. 2 people, a man and a woman, bound, gagged, and shaking. Their clothes were torn, their eyes red from crying. I didn't know them, but At that moment, I felt our fear was the same. We were pieces of the same nightmare. The captors stood just outside the reach of the moonlight, silent, still. They didn't demand money, didn't speak threats. They only watched. I could feel their gaze move between us like they were waiting for something. A reaction, a mistake, a show of weakness. Time became meaningless. Every second stretched into an eternity. My lungs ached from breathing too fast, from trying not to sob. I could hear the faint rustle of the forest, the slow, deliberate movements of someone pacing behind me. Once, one of them leaned close enough that I could feel their breath on my ear. They whispered something, too soft to understand, and laughed quietly before walking away. I tried to focus on anything that could help me later. The sound of distant water, maybe a river or a stream. The faint smell of oil on their gloves. The pattern of the stars above. Anything to anchor me to something real. Then for a moment, everything went still. No footsteps, no voices, just the wind moving through the trees. My wrists burned where the rope rubbed against them, but I noticed something strange. The knot felt looser. Maybe they tied it hastily, or maybe one of them made a mistake. My mind raced. I could either wait for whatever came next or take my one chance. When I heard one of the captors moving away, I acted. Slowly, carefully, I twisted my wrist until the rope gave way. My heartbeat thundered in my chest as I slipped one hand free, then the other. I looked toward the other victims. Their eyes met mine, wide with pleading, but there was no time. A twig snapped nearby, and I ran. Branches tore at my clothes. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't dare stop. I could hear shouting behind me, the crunch of boots chasing through the underbrush. Every muscle screamed, but fear drove me forward. I stumbled down a slope, nearly falling into a shallow ditch, and kept running until my legs almost gave out. Then, finally, the sound of cars. Distant but real. A main road. A passing truck slowed when they saw me waving, dirt-covered, trembling and bleeding. The driver's face went pale. They called the police immediately, and within minutes, flashing lights filled the darkness I had escaped. Back at the clearing, investigators found the two victims, bound, but alive. Their captors were gone, vanished without a trace. Tire marks, footprints, pieces of tape all collected, all analyzed. Yet none of it led to anywhere. The local news covered it for weeks, calling it the Rural Road Incident. But without suspects, the case faded from headlines like every other unresolved mystery. Months passed. I tried to rebuild my life, but the past wouldn't let me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing phantom footsteps in the hallway. Every time I drove home late, headlights behind me sent me spiraling into a panic. The doctors called it trauma, but it felt more like a curse. Then years later, I got a call. The detective who once led my case told me something had changed. New DNA testing methods had found a partial match from the evidence left behind. Someone linked to other disappearances in neighboring states. The name they gave me didn't sound familiar, but the details did. A man who drove an old truck, known to frequent photography meetups. Someone who used different names online. That revelation reopened everything I had fought to bury. Suddenly, the nights of panic made sense again. I remembered one voice, low, almost conversational, whispering something about capturing the perfect shot. I thought it was madness at the time, but now I wonder if it was literal. The police believe there were at least 2 people involved. One has likely vanished. The other, they think, still lingers somewhere in that same rural area, maybe living a quiet life, blending in. The thought makes my skin crawl. Even now, I drive differently. I never take the same road twice at night. I keep my phone recording whenever I feel uneasy. I check my mirrors obsessively. Fear, I've learned, doesn't disappear. It adapts, finds new ways to remind you that survival doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes I revisit that road, not because I want to, but because I need to remember. The ditch is overgrown now. The clearing is smaller, reclaimed by the woods. But if you stand there long enough, you can still feel the air shift, heavy with memory. Some say evil leaves a stain that never fades. I believe that now. People often ask what haunts me most, the faces of the victims, the voices of the captors, or the uncertainty of never knowing why. But the truth is simpler. What haunts me most is the silence that follows. The kind that fills the world after the horror ends, when you realize you're alive, but part of you never really escaped. If there's one thing I can tell anyone listening, it's this. Terror doesn't announce itself. It waits quietly, patiently, in the ordinary moments, in the hum of the tires on an empty road, in the flicker of headlights behind you, in the instant before everything changes. I'm alive, but that night lives with me. It follows like a second shadow, always at my back. And I know somewhere out there, the ones who took me are still walking free, perhaps watching another road, waiting for another unsuspecting traveler. Because sometimes survival isn't an ending, it's the beginning of a lifetime spent looking over your shoulder, wondering if the darkness is ever truly gone. And that is why I will never forget.